Atlantis. In a dialogue written 2,400 years ago, a philosopher described a civilization so advanced it vanished in a single day. Plato's Timaeus and Critias tell of an island nation that existed 9,000 years before his time, somewhere beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The Atlanteans had built their capital in concentric rings of water and land, connected by tunnels large enough for ships to pass through. They mined a mysterious metal called orichalcum that glowed like fire. Their naval power was unmatched across the Mediterranean, but the Atlanteans grew arrogant. They launched wars of conquest against Athens and Egypt. The gods, disgusted by their hubris, decided to punish them. In a single day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island sank beneath the waves. Every palace, every temple, every person disappeared into the sea. For over 2 millennia, explorers have searched for Atlantis. They've proposed locations from the Greek island of Santorini to the frozen plains of Antarctica. Some believe Plato was describing the Minoan civilization destroyed by a volcanic eruption. Others think he invented the entire story as a philosophical allegory about the dangers of imperial ambition. Archaeological expeditions continue to chase leads across the ocean floor. No definitive evidence has ever been found. It demonstrates how a single ancient text can inspire millennia of searching for something that may never have existed. Atlantis lives not in the archaeological record, but in humanity's persistent hope that lost perfection might someday be recovered from the depths. Pompeii. The city lived their final day unaware they would sleep beneath volcanic stone for 17 centuries. In the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, Pompeii thrived as a resort destination for wealthy Romans. 20,000 people inhabited this coastal town, enjoying theaters, bathhouses, and fertile vineyards watered by volcanic soil. They had lived beside the mountain for generations, unaware it was a volcano. On August 24th, 79 AD, Vesuvius erupted with catastrophic force. Pompeii vanished under 20 feet of ash and pumice, its inhabitants frozen mid-flight as they tried to escape. Ash clouds blotted out the sun. Roofs collapsed under the weight. Those who stayed died of asphyxiation. Those who fled were buried on the roads. The city disappeared from maps and memory. For 1,700 years, it remained perfectly preserved beneath its volcanic tomb. Rediscovered in 1748 during construction work, excavations revealed something unprecedented. The ash had captured everything. Loaves of bread sat in ovens. Political graffiti covered walls. Erotic frescoes decorated bedroom chambers. Archaeologists poured plaster into cavities left by decomposed bodies, creating casts of victims in their final moments. A mother shielding her child, a dog straining against its chain, people clutching coins they hoped would save them. The tragedy that erased Pompeii became archaeology's greatest gift. Nowhere else offers such a complete snapshot of Roman daily life, preserved down to the food on tables and the expressions on faces. Excavations continue today, each discovery adding detail to that frozen August morning. It reveals how catastrophe can become archaeology's greatest gift, preserving a moment in time with perfect clarity. Troy. For 2,000 years, scholars dismissed it as fantasy until one man took Homer at his word. The Iliad describes a great walled city besieged for 10 years by Greek forces, its towers rising above the Aegean plains, its treasures glittering behind massive gates. Historians called it pure mythology, a poet's invention with no basis in reality. The sophisticated tales of Helen, Achilles, and the wooden horse were simply too perfect, too literary to reflect actual events. Then, Heinrich Schliemann, a German businessman obsessed with Homer's poetry, decided to take the ancient geography literally. In the 1870s, he excavated a mound called Hisarlik in northwestern Turkey, exactly where Homer's descriptions suggested Troy should stand. Beneath the earth, he found not one city, but 9, stacked like geological layers across 3,000 years of continuous habitation. His discovery of a golden treasure, which he controversially called Priam's treasure, proved that a wealthy Bronze Age civilization had existed, precisely where the epic claimed. Archaeologists now debate which layer represents the Homeric Troy. Most favor layer 7A, destroyed by fire around 1180 BC, its timeline matching the traditional date of the Trojan War. The site reveals a sophisticated trade network connecting Asia and Europe, fortified walls confirming descriptions of Troy's defensive strength, and evidence of violent destruction that could align with siege warfare. Whether Homer chronicled actual events or wove history into legend remains contested, but Troy exists. Its ruins earned UNESCO World Heritage status, vindication for an epic that preserved truth skeptics refused to believe for millennia. It shows how ancient poetry can preserve truth that skeptics refused to believe for millennia. Petra. In the desert canyons of Jordan, an entire civilization was carved from living rock and forgotten. The Nabateans built their capital where rose-red cliffs met narrow gorges, controlling the trade routes that carried frankincense and myrrh from Arabia to the Mediterranean. Between 400 BC and 106 AD, Petra thrived as a commercial crossroads, its population reaching 30,000. They carved elaborate facades into the sandstone, their engineers designing sophisticated water conduits that captured every precious drop of rainfall and channeled it through the arid landscape. The city's treasury, with its columns and friezes rising over 130 feet, served as both tomb and temple, its ornate entrance suggesting the wealth that flowed through these canyons. Then, earthquakes struck, trade routes shifted, the caravans found easier paths, and Petra's prosperity evaporated like water on desert stone. The Nabateans abandoned their carved city, and the world forgot it existed. For centuries, local Bedouin tribes knew of the ruins, but the Western world remained ignorant until 1812, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as an Arab pilgrim to gain entry. What he found stunned him. Over 800 structures carved directly into the cliff faces, their pink facades glowing in the desert sun. Today, archaeologists estimate only 15% of Petra has been excavated. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar continue revealing new chambers and buildings beneath the sand. It demonstrates that entire cities can hide in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look. Machu Picchu. High above the Urubamba Valley, the Incas built a city the conquistadors never found. In the 15th century, Inca engineers carved a citadel into a mountain ridge 8,000 feet above sea level, constructing buildings from precisely fitted dry stones without mortar, terracing the slopes for agriculture, and channeling water through stone conduits with remarkable sophistication. Around 1572, as Spanish forces closed in on the last Inca strongholds, Machu Picchu was abandoned. The Spanish never discovered it during their conquest. Local Quechua farmers knew of the ruins on the peak above them, but the outside world remained ignorant. In 1911, Yale historian Hiram Bingham arrived searching for Vilcabamba, the legendary last refuge of the Incas. A local guide led him up the mountain, and Bingham encountered stone structures emerging from jungle growth, perfectly preserved terraces stepping down the mountainside, and temples aligned with astronomical precision. Bingham claimed to have discovered a lost city, though indigenous people had always known it was there. Excavations revealed the Temple of the Sun with its ceremonial windows, the Intihuatana stone that served as a ritual calendar, and evidence suggesting Machu Picchu functioned as a royal estate or a sacred retreat rather than a military fortress. Debate continues over whether the site was truly lost or simply unknown to European scholarship, raising questions about whose knowledge counts as discovery. It reveals how discovery depends on who is doing the looking and whose knowledge counts. Angkor, the largest pre-industrial city on Earth, vanished beneath the jungle, its temples becoming mountains of stone and vine. Between the 9th and 15th centuries, the Khmer Empire built a capital so vast it housed over 1 million people. Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument ever constructed, crowned a sophisticated metropolis of hydraulic channels, reservoirs, and temples that stretched across hundreds of square miles. Water management systems more complex than anything in medieval Europe sustained rice agriculture that fed a population rivaling any contemporary city. Then, the empire collapsed. By the mid-15th century, Thai invasions had weakened Khmer power, and many scholars believe the intricate water system failed catastrophically, perhaps through environmental degradation or climate shifts. The capital was abandoned, though local communities continue living among the ruins. Jungle roots cracked stone causeways. Trees grew through temple roofs. What had been the beating heart of Southeast Asia became a landscape of ruins, half swallowed by vegetation. The outside world forgot Angkor's scale entirely. When French naturalist Henri Mouhot publicized the ruins in 1860, Europeans could scarcely believe such grandeur existed. Modern excavations revealed the true scope: over 1,000 temples, urban sprawl larger than modern New York, and engineering that anticipated industrial age hydraulics by centuries. Recent LiDAR surveys continue uncovering vast neighborhoods hidden beneath forest canopy, suggesting archaeologists have barely scratched the surface. It shows how even the largest cities can be swallowed by nature when human systems fail, leaving only stone to remember what water once sustained. Like Dorado. The Spanish searched for a city of gold and found nothing, but the city they sought was there all along. For centuries after the conquest, conquistadors chased rumors through Colombian jungles. Indigenous people spoke of a golden king who covered himself in gold dust before diving into a sacred lake. The legend grew with each telling until El Dorado became shorthand for any lost treasure, any impossible dream. The name itself meant the Golden One, referring not to a place but to a man, to a ritual. But Europeans heard what they wanted to hear. They heard gold, they heard city, they heard wealth beyond imagining. Expedition after expedition plunged into the wilderness. Gonzalo Pizarro lost 4,000 men searching the Amazon. Lope de Aguirre descended into murderous madness on the Orinoco. Sir Walter Raleigh squandered his fortune and eventually his life chasing the dream. They found indigenous cities, yes, but none paved with gold. They found Lake Guatavita where the ritual had actually occurred, but the treasure at the bottom disappointed. The legend consumed them all. Scholars eventually traced El Dorado to the Muisca people's coronation ceremony. A new leader would cover himself in gold dust and offer treasures to the lake gods while his people watched from reed boats. It was real. It was sacred. It was never a city at all. Yet the searching never stopped. Even today, expeditions hunt for a golden city that exists only in the European imagination, built from misunderstood stories and insatiable greed. It demonstrates that legends of lost cities often contain kernels of truth, waiting to be separated from myth. Great Zimbabwe. Stone walls 30 feet high rose from the African plateau, and for a century, Europeans refused to believe who built them. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, the Kingdom of Zimbabwe controlled the gold and ivory trade routes of southeastern Africa from this monumental capital. The city's massive stone walls, constructed without mortar, enclosed an area housing up to 18,000 people. The great enclosure's outer wall stretched 800 feet in circumference, its precisely fitted granite blocks forming curves that had stood for centuries. Inside, a mysterious conical tower rose 30 feet high, its purpose still debated. Soapstone birds carved with extraordinary skill crowned stone monoliths throughout the complex. The city was abandoned in the 15th century, possibly due to resource depletion, overpopulation, and shifts in trade routes that made the location less strategic. But the ruins remained, testament to architectural and organizational sophistication. When European colonizers encountered Great Zimbabwe in the late 19th century, they confronted a problem. The ruins were too impressive, too sophisticated, too monumental to fit. Their narrative of African primitiveness. Rather than accept the obvious truth, they invented elaborate theories attributing the construction to Phoenicians, Arabs, or even the biblical Queen of Sheba. Anything but indigenous Africans. Archaeology eventually proved what should have been apparent from the beginning. Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people, representing one of Africa's greatest medieval civilizations. It reveals how racism can blind explorers to obvious truth, and how monuments become battlegrounds for historical narrative. Çatalhöyük. 9,000 years ago in central Turkey, people built a city with no streets where the dead slept beneath the living. Between 7,500 and 5,700 BC, Çatalhöyük housed 8,000 people in mud brick homes pressed so tightly together that residents entered through openings in their roofs, walking across their neighbors' houses to reach their own. No boulevard separated the dwellings. No plazas gathered the community. The city was a honeycomb of rectangular rooms where families lived above their ancestors, burying their dead in shallow graves beneath the sleeping platforms where children were born and elders died. British archaeologist James Mellart discovered the site in 1958, finding a settlement that challenged every assumption about early urban life. The houses showed no evidence of social hierarchy. No palaces rose above common dwellings. No temples dominated the landscape. Instead, certain rooms featured elaborate shrines decorated with plastered bull horns and wall paintings, depicting hunts, geometric patterns, and erupting volcanoes. The bull imagery particularly fascinated researchers, suggesting ritual significance that permeated domestic space. Excavations revealed a society operating by rules modern archaeologists still struggle to decode. Why roof entry instead of doors? Why bury family members underfoot? Why abandon such a successful settlement around 5700 BC? Ongoing work continues to uncover artifacts and structures that rewrite understanding of Neolithic urbanization, revealing sophisticated art, trade networks spanning hundreds of miles, and social organization unlike anything that followed. It shows that the first cities were stranger than we imagined, organized by rules we still don't fully understand. Cahokia. On the banks of the Mississippi, a city larger than London thrived and died before Columbus was born. Between 1050 and 1200 AD, 10 to 20,000 people lived in the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico, building massive earthen pyramids that dominated the floodplain near modern St. Louis. The centerpiece was Monk's Mound, a terraced pyramid 100 feet tall and covering 14 acres at its base. It remains the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas, constructed entirely by human hands carrying millions of basketfuls of earth. The city featured sophisticated urban planning, with residential neighborhoods, ceremonial plazas, and a wooden astronomical calendar called Woodhenge that tracked solstices and equinoxes. Archaeological evidence reveals long-distance trade networks bringing copper from the Great Lakes, mica from the Carolinas, and shells from the Gulf Coast. Yet by 1350 AD, Cahokia stood abandoned. The decline appears rapid and traumatic, with evidence of violence, palisade walls suggesting conflict, and mass burials indicating possible warfare or disease. Climate change may have disrupted agriculture, resource depletion strained. The dense population, or political upheaval, fractured the society. The city's inhabitants dispersed, leaving only the mounds as silent witnesses. For centuries, most Americans remained unaware that such complexity had existed in pre-contact North America. Early European settlers assumed the mounds were natural formations or built by a lost race of mound builders. Only 20th century archaeology revealed the truth. It demonstrates that complex civilizations rose and fell in North America long before Europeans arrived, their stories nearly lost to time. Mohenjo-daro. They built one of history's first great cities, invented urban planning, and then vanished without telling us their names. Between 2500 and 1900 BC, along the Indus River, in what is now Pakistan, the people of Mohenjo-daro constructed something extraordinary. Their city followed a precise grid layout with streets intersecting at right angles, a sophistication that wouldn't appear in Europe for millennia. They engineered covered drainage systems beneath every major street. They standardized their bricks to exact measurements. At its height, 40,000 people lived in these carefully planned neighborhoods. What makes Mohenjo-daro especially haunting is what archaeologists haven't found. There are no palaces, no temples, no obvious seats of power. The city appears almost egalitarian, organized by principles we still don't fully grasp. They developed a writing system, pressed into seals and pottery, that remains completely undeciphered despite a century of effort. We can walk through their streets, examine their weights and measures, study their sophisticated public baths, but we cannot read a single word they wrote. Around 1900 BC, the city was abandoned. Whether climate change shifted the river, whether invaders came, whether disease struck, we simply don't know. The civilization that rivaled ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia in advancement left no decoded texts, no deciphered histories, no names of rulers or gods. Discovered in 1922, Mohenjo-daro continues to confound researchers. Every excavation reveals more questions than answers. It reveals that we can stand in the ruins of greatness and still not understand who built it or why they left the White City. In one of Earth's last unmapped places, lasers pierced the jungle canopy and revealed a city time forgot. For centuries, indigenous peoples in Honduras spoke of La Ciudad Blanca, the White City, hidden deep in the Mosquitia rainforest. Spanish conquistadors searched for it. Adventurers died looking. Most dismissed the stories as legend, another El Dorado that existed only in imagination. But the legends were true. In 2012, a team flew over the jungle with LiDAR technology, using laser pulses to map what lay beneath the impenetrable canopy. The data revealed something extraordinary. Plazas, earthworks, and pyramids spread across the forest floor. In 2015, archaeologists hacked through the jungle and found a city frozen in time. Stone sculptures emerged from the earth. Ceremonial vessels sat where they had been placed 500 years earlier. Nothing had been looted. No one had been here since the inhabitants walked away. The city was likely abandoned around 1500 AD, possibly when European diseases arrived in the Americas before the Europeans themselves did, spreading through trade. Networks and decimating populations who would never see their killers. The ruins remain largely unexplored. The jungle is too remote, too dangerous, too thick. Archaeologists have barely scratched the surface of what might be an entire lost civilization, its cities scattered through one of the world's most inaccessible regions. It proves that, in the age of satellites, there are still lost cities waiting to be found, their secrets preserved by isolation.